Welcome to Act 2, You're On. Join us weekly at our studio roundtable as Rhonda, Kate, and Linda invite spectacular guests to weigh in on staying sexy, vibrant, and healthy. Launch your next great act with authenticity and purpose. Summon your courage, superstar, and step into the limelight. So grab a coffee or a martini, and let's set the stage for a grand entrance. It's Act 2. You're on.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to A2YO, Act 2, You're On, a community of change makers igniting personal and societal renaissance through inspirational conversations and purpose-driven topics. I am Rhonda Garvin-Conaway, and I have the great pleasure of podcasting with these two amazing humans.
I'm Linda Ty. And I'm Kate Levy, and we are also joined by our talented producers, Susan Game Changer Nagel and Kathy I Got Game Carswell.
Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you're listening to today's podcast and wondering, how do I incorporate service and stewardship into my Act 2, into my next great act? You're going to want to listen to this conversation because we're going to tackle these questions. In our studio, we are very happy to have our guest, Michael Cipoletti, and we'll be able to hear his insights and get information about the work that he does. Michael Cipoletti grew up on Long Island, New York, became involved with service work in high school through a club called Students for 60,000. He went to Stonehill College, and between his first and second year, traveled to Nicaragua with an alumni group. In 1997, he helped found the HOPE program at Stonehill. After graduating from college, he worked in a variety of small business ventures and went on to get his MBA at Boston University. After 5 years away, Michael returned to Nicaragua and realized he wanted to dedicate his life to service and development. Michael currently serves as executive director at FNEInternational. FNE Facilitate, Network, Empower, which was founded in 2011 with a focus on health, education, and infrastructure in Nicaragua, Peru, and the Dominican Republic. Welcome, Michael Cipoletti.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
Hi there. Where are you speaking to us from today?
The aforementioned Nicaragua. I'm in my...
And how warm is it?
Well, fortunately, hopefully it'll hold out, but it's very overcast right now. So it's only about 90 degrees.
Okay.
And but it looks like we're about 30 to 45 minutes away from a loud rainstorm. So hopefully we can get through this before it begins.
Well, let's get into it, my friend. I've had the pleasure of knowing you for many years and admired the work that you do. But for many, they may not be familiar with FNEInternational. What is it, and how does it differ from other service organizations? So
FNEInternational is a 501c3 nonprofit, originally founded in Boston. I lived in Boston up until 2019, and then in the summer of 19 gave up my house and realized that after spending only 45 days there in 3 years, it was time to maybe make some changes. And so we're a development organization working in Nicaragua, Peru, Dominican Republic. And again, I think that over the course of the past decade and a half, 2 decades, there's been a big change in what nonprofits do. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, most of the nonprofit world was focused on charity work. And over the past decade, 2 decades, there's been a real shift from charity to development, sustainability. Instead of creating dependency, creating opportunities for people to break cycles of poverty and for people to improve their lives through sustainable change. And so FNE takes an approach that, rather than being a top-down, north-to-south approach, is a hand-in-hand parallel approach. And with the project in 3 different countries, we work really hard to try to encourage lateral development versus a vertical development. So utilizing the knowledge and skill sets in Nicaragua and bringing some of that knowledge to Peru or Dominican Republic and vice versa. So it's a process. It's not quite perfected, but little by little, I feel like we're making a difference and making strides and changes.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And I think it's so informative to understand what's behind the approach in doing the work. And thinking about that, for those who are tuning in, what is it that you think is really important for us to understand specifically about poverty in our world, on the globe, and how it affects us all? What, I guess it's the why does it matter, right? We know that these things exist, but can we speak to that a little bit from your experience, Michael?
Yeah. I think that in every facet of our lives, regardless of our socioeconomic status, poverty impacts us. And, I grew up in an upper middle class white community on Long Island, and in a relatively privileged environment. And again, when I first came to Nicaragua, I felt a lot of guilt about what I had, what I was given, and just again, because I was born in the right place, with the right opportunities and resources at my disposal. And in 1998, I was sort of imparted a really important lesson, and that was that we need to not go down to the level of the poor. We need to work on bringing people up to the level that we're used to and accustomed to. And so I strive through my personal journey to try to bring people up and out of poverty. But again, as a catalyst and not necessarily as a provider. So basically, we're looking to give people opportunities to find ways to improve their lives and break cycles of poverty, and then for those same people to impart what they've learned and experienced to others, and create a chain and a ripple effect. And poverty, affects every bit of our world and current affairs right now. And people, we talk a lot right now about border walls and migrants and illegals and all these sort of words and terms and lefts and rights. And the root of all of these movements is steeped deeply in poverty. And we need to understand why that poverty exists and how we're complicit in making it exist. And then we need to do what we can to eradicate it. And by creating an equitable, just world, all this talk of migration, all of this talk of illegal people and all these sort of ugly phrases that we use on a daily basis to denigrate human beings, will slowly fade away. And again, our objective is to make ourselves obsolete. I want to work to a point where my services aren't needed anymore. And we have a long way to go, but that's the objective and that's the goal.
That's beautiful.
It is.
There's a great thinker, Richard Rohr, who talks about collective consciousness, and that any delusion, any separation is a delusion, because of course we're finding more and more that we only survive and thrive together, right? And so this idea that, because we're here and we're living with a certain affluence, that we're not connected to the situation, to the plight of everyone else. And I also thought it was such a wonderful point that you just made about the change in this idea of service and mission as this lofty thing that you go do for these people to really feel better about yourself. And in truth, it's about development, like you were saying, it's about sustainability, but it's also about being in communion with people. And I know, my son had a great experience on a mission trip, and he came home really transformed and moved because of the experience, the conversations that he had, but also the generosity. He was so struck by the generosity and the hope of the people that he was living with, that they would share anything, and they had hopes and dreams for him. And it was really a remarkable experience for him. And he did some service while he was there, but it's very mutual, and we're also connected. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the way COVID has affected your work, the work of FNE, and what you're doing, and what is the organization's biggest need right now?
Yeah. So I got here, returned to Nicaragua after a few days in the U.S. on March 6th of 2020. The next day, a group of medical providers, students, and physicians, nurses, and physical therapists arrived, and we did a week-long brigade. And during that week, we went from, COVID is kind of this thing happening, to people getting calls from their places of work and saying, you're not going to be allowed to come in for 2 weeks because we're afraid that you might be carrying or sick. And so we went from a year of what was looking to be a full year of trips and groups and partnerships, to a year of me working from the chair that I'm sitting in and trying to sort of hold everything together. In 2018, there was some civil unrest here in Nicaragua that really adversely affected our ability to work with groups and host teams. And it, over the course of 2019 into 2020, we had done a really nice job of rebuilding people's confidence in traveling to Nicaragua, and had stronger programs in Peru and Dominican Republic. So we took a bad opportunity, we pivoted, and were able to sort of actually grow and feel stronger because of it. In March of 2020, it really felt like checkmate. Felt like, where do we go from here? How do we move forward? And again, so many organizations shuttered. So many organizations cut payroll, cut staff, cut services, and we were committed to not doing any of that. And so we did put most of our staff on a virtual remote working experience. But we kept our library, we kept some of our essential services opened. We have a program called Salud para Todos los Niños, which is a program of 120 kids with chronic disease. And Salud para Todos los Niños, for those of you that don't speak Spanish, is health for all children. Kids with muscular dystrophy, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, and other congenital birth defects. We work with the families to help teach them how to better advocate for their children. We help provide diagnostics and pharmaceuticals that are not provided under the healthcare system of Nicaragua, and wheelchairs and physical therapy services that are very scarce. And so with those kids, we were doing virtual sort of appointments and making visits when necessary, but trying to practice as much social distancing as possible. And we also pivoted, seeing the need for PPE in Nicaragua, Peru, and Dominican Republic. And overall, we raised over $100,000 for protection and for food baskets. About $85,000 of that was in Nicaragua, and $20,000 of that included a container that we brought down with the Pan American Health Organization and an organization called Global Links through a generous donor in Connecticut. And the rest was masks and face shields and protective suits and gloves. And so in Nicaragua, we distributed protection in 12 of the 17 departments. And Nicaragua has 2 departments on the Caribbean coast, which are very difficult to access. And we worked with a number of organizations here in Nicaragua and created a coalition to ensure that supplies were being distributed, healthcare workers were having access to the protection they needed. And in a lot of cases, in some of the rural communities where we have families that were out of work or families that didn't have access to markets and things like that, we provided food baskets, which lasted 2 to 3 weeks. And we did that here in Nicaragua, in Dominican Republic, and Peru. And so, again, we now are struggling to sort of keep the ship moving forward. We haven't had a group in a year and a half, or since March of 2020. We are in the process of planning some trips beginning in December potentially a trip for our Salud para Todos los Niños program in August here in Nicaragua. And then we're also in the process of planning a 3-day virtual tour of our projects here in Nicaragua, Peru, and Dominican Republic in July, which is in sort of conjunction with the celebration of our 10th anniversary. So we're trying to continue to stay relevant, trying to continue to keep our donors and participants engaged. And it's very hard to do that because people want to be here, people want to participate, people want to be active. But again, one of the things that I always say on the trips is that the trip may be ending, but the journey is just beginning. And so we have so many volunteers that have traveled with us 5 and 10 and 11 and 12 times. And those folks are committed to the cause and stay involved and engaged. And our hope is that everybody that travels with us will stay engaged with our work, whether it means a $5 or $10 monthly contribution, or just sharing our posts on social media. I think that these trips that and you talked about your son's experience, that trip on its own has a greater impact on him than it does in the community. But when we take these trips week after week and build a chain and continuity, we really begin to create ripples across the water and create a lasting impact. So we're trying to figure out ways to keep that lasting impact happening without having the groups traveling with us. And again, it's a really difficult path to sort of navigate right now.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, definitely, it's just really powerful what you're doing. I love that whole idea, that ripple effect by group after group after group across the ocean. And I do believe you're having an impact, and you are making a difference in that way. And certainly helping them with the food and the health is vital, because without our health and without food to eat, we're not going to survive. But I'm also really curious, being an artist, how FNE International is incorporating the arts into its initiatives and the values of these experiences, because there's a very unique way that art plays a role. Yes.
So lots of organizations focus on sports as an outlet for kids, which is, again, great. And we do all kinds of stuff. I was just out on Wednesday running around with 14-year-olds, and I still am feeling the physical on a baseball field. About 8 years ago, we began the process of building what became the first rural lending library in Nicaragua, the Richard Streb Memorial Library. And Dick Streb was an educator in New York, a peace activist who had worked at Northport High School, where I studied, and then during the 80s was worked with Witness for Peace and was down in Nicaragua very often. He passed away in 2008 or 2009. And so students approached us with a desire to have a place in the community where they could study and get homework done and do research without having to travel on a bus to Leon 30 to 45 minutes and paying for cyber cafes and things like that. So we surveyed about 500 families of the 1,100 plus families in the community, and from that designed the Streb Library. And the library was financed by the Cirillo family, and Vale Cirillo was a student at Berkeley College of Music whose life ended in a horrible motorcycle accident on Mass Ave crossing into Cambridge in 2012. And so Vale's mother and stepdad donated the insurance money that they received to finance the library. And we always had a vision, and the community had a vision of having a place where students could learn music and play music. And so we added a music component to the library. And then we began working with a local Nicaraguan nonprofit that has a park for children here in the city. and they offered a program on declamation of poetry, which we began to finance and incorporate into the rural area. So beginning in 2013, kids from Chakraseca, the main community we work in, have recited poetry at all kinds of national festivals. They've been on television. They performed in a national theater, all kinds of things like that. And the group from this small rural community has received sort of national acclaim for their poetry declamation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And then, you know, we saw and realized that art as a form of expression is really so vital to development and growth and opportunity. So we created a program called Crearte. One of our local volunteers who was a film student who had her studies affected by the civil unrest of 2018, developed a program, and we had a dozen kids from Chakraseca who began with some basic drawing classes, learned about photography, learned about mural design. They directed and developed a documentary about one of the community leaders that can be found on our website, on our YouTube channel. And, you know, the library has continued to be a sort of an art center and a place where people can go and draw or create piñatas or, you know, or just read and nurture that sort of other side that so often is not thought about by NGOs. It's because maybe because it's a little intangible. And so we're trying to make the intangible more tangible, more accessible. And one thing that we know for certain is that exposing young people to art stimulates creative thinking and enables for sort of critical thinking skills to be formed. And these are skills that are often lacking as young people come from the rural areas up and into the university level and into the job force. So art unlocks powers that we would not be able to access otherwise. Additionally,
Yes.
Additionally, a friend of mine and a Stonehill alumni, Kelvin Ramirez, who's a member of our board, is a professor at Lesley University. He's an art therapy professor. And we have brought down between Nicaragua and Dominican Republic somewhere between 6 and 8 groups of art therapy students, master's level students, doctoral level students. We've worked mostly in special needs settings with those groups, and we've seen just some amazing sort of things happen by bringing in expressive therapy. And I think that lots of people dismiss expressive therapy as pseudoscience, but there are really strong studies and there's lots of data out there that shows us that expressive therapy unlocks pain, unlocks trauma, and allows for healing to begin. And again, throughout our journey as an organization, we see trauma, we see pain, we see need to unlock and unleash that so people can begin to heal. And through healing, we can, again, begin to break the chains of poverty and oppression that we see on a daily basis in the developing world.
That's beautiful. And I know it resonates with the three of us because it's the arts that have brought us together. And we've all worked in some aspect of our life with art in therapy, and art is a way of expressing yourself, and definitely you access parts of your brain that then informs the way you can move through your day. And that's beautiful. So I know at the end, we're going to ask, is there anything we can do to be of assistance, or people out there who are eager and inspired by what you are doing? But I'm wondering if you'll indulge us and go back in time and just tell us a little bit about, you were working in Boston in business, you got your MBA at BU, and what made you move from profit to nonprofit, I wonder?
Well, I'd gone through a number of different iterations and careers and always focused on working on my own and not with for a big corporation. And I think that was important for me, and I learned a lot. And but I wasn't fulfilled. I was making good money. I had a nice life, but there was something missing. And in 2007, I was running a marble and granite fabrication and import company based in Boston. The partners in that business were doing some things that weren't so great legally, and I sort of spoke up and said that if we didn't make some changes, that I was going to step away from the business. And the two honest partners realized that action needed to be taken and took action. However, the dishonest partner had done some things that led to rather us filing a Chapter 11. Rather than a bankruptcy that was a reorg, we had to do a bankruptcy that was a liquidation. And I had a number of customers who had made deposits and would have lost. I think the largest deposit was $12,000 or $13,000, and I couldn't sort of live with myself knowing that I had caused this financial distress for people. So an attorney that I'd worked with knew a couple guys that were looking to open another marble business, and I met with them, and they invited me to be a partner in their business. And with the understanding that we would honor the deposits of these other jobs. And we opened a fabrication shop on Route 20 near Worcester, Mass. And I realized that I needed, after lots of difficulty, I needed to take a little vacation. So I thought a lot about where I wanted to go, and ultimately found myself buying a ticket to come here to Nicaragua. And so in October of 2007, I came here for what I thought was going to be a vacation. One of the first things I did after buying the ticket was call my high school teacher, Pete White, who had retired as a teacher and began a nonprofit. And that trip that was going to be a lot of time on the beach and visiting some people for a little bit of time turned into like a mostly work trip. I had like a 2-page task list of things he needed me to do for him. And I realized that I wanted to be here, and this is what I wanted to do. And so as the economy tanked in 2008 and things really were sort of spiraling down the tubes, I found a way to transition myself out of business and into nonprofit on a full-time basis. And so really from late 2008, early 2009 until 2013, I did this as a volunteer with no salary, and found some like-minded folks. And again, for a brief period, we were a subordinate chapter of my high school teachers organization, and then ultimately spun off and became FNEInternational. And the Peru program was birthed out of the project that Stonehill had in Peru, and one of our founding board members, Travis Kump, is a Stonehill grad from 2009 versus 1999, and he had been heavily involved in Peru. And we had briefly worked in Haiti following the earthquake. Unfortunately, there was a real lack of transparency that hampered our ability to implement projects the way we wanted to, and we had to ultimately close that project. But in 2016, I went to the Dominican Republic. I landed on election day on 2016. So that was a long, painful evening on the roof of this house in a place I'd never been before. And so now we have the 3 projects, and we have I'm the only paid U.S. staff member. We have two international staff members here on the Nicaraguan side, and then we have a team of 23 or 24 Nicaraguans. 22 of them are women and 2 men. And And yeah, I mean, and so what started off as a vacation trip has morphed into a 3-country, multi-dimensional project that has impacted thousands of people directly and indirectly.
Amazing.
Amazing
really
story.
It's a
Right.
purpose-driven life.
Yes, absolutely. And so not all of us are going to be as extraordinary as you to lead such a large charge, but what guidance or advice do you offer, like for somebody who's listening, who wants to get involved, wants to help out? What are the best ways to do that, or what thoughts do you have for our listeners and viewers and for us?
I think that there are opportunities everywhere, domestically and internationally. I think that service is a critical component of any life, anybody's life, everybody's life, that we need to give back and as a way of sort of being thankful for everything that's been that we have. And again, I know that for many of us, we've worked hard and earned what we have. But again, there are lots of people, and I always am drawn and use a reference to a book by Ron Susskind called The Hope and the Unseen. And Ron wrote that book about a young man who graduated from Brown University in 1999, and he grew up in the inner city of Washington. And the obstacles that he had in his life to overcome and to get to Brown, to get to just to college, to get out of high school. For the vast majority of us who are in successful careers, the path was relatively clear for us. We had an obstacle here and there, but for the most part, it was a pretty smooth walk. We may have fallen a few times, but there are people that can't even get to their feet from the starting line. And so we need to do what we can to help those people get to their feet. And to do so in a way that is respectful and honors who they are and where they come from and where they're going. And I think that one of the most important things is when you decide what it is you want to do or where it is you want to go in your journey, in your service work, whatever you commit to, you follow through on. And that's one of the hardest things for us is people that come to us and say, oh, I want to do this and that and the other thing. And then ultimately, something happens. And the first thing that gets sort of tossed aside is their service work. And so we find lots of times where we start something that is going like gangbangers and then sort of just fizzles. And it's up to me or it's up to one of our board members to sort of pick up the slack. And so service changes lives, and service changes lives on both sides. And again, it makes us feel good about ourselves. It makes us feel like we're doing something to be a positive change maker in the world. And if you do it right and you're doing it with the right organization that has the right approach, and it's part of something that has continuity, and there's countless organizations that do this the right way, that your hours coupled with the thousands of hours by countless others are really going to push something in the right direction. And again, we want to give people access to knowledge. We want to give people access to education. We want to give people access to opportunities. And again, we want to ensure that people that were born with so many disadvantages can be given that little bit of push that they need to overcome some of those. And again, I think it's important to understand you're never going to make everybody happy. You're never going to get 100% have 100% approval rating. But if you can change one life, if you can change two lives, if you can, we build houses for families. Taking a family that's living in a plastic house that's made of plastic and scrap and putting them in a house made of brick and concrete and steel, we know their children are going to sleep better. They're going to probably improve in their academics. We know that the family is going to feel more pride of their environment, and so there's the obvious initial impact, and then there's all the secondary impacts. And so those secondary impacts are also two-way, because again, you feel good as a volunteer. You feel good doing something. Oh, I dug a hole and for this family. But then there's the residual of I've now begun a journey towards helping others, to making an impact, to making the world a better place, to creating a little more equity in a world that is vastly inequitable, in a world where there is just so much unbalance, and in a world that, again, we're very focused when we look at media, when we look at how the news and how social media is thrown at us. We're very focused on, well, this is what makes me different from this woman or this man. This is what makes me different from this group or that group. We need to look and see the commonalities, the threads that bring us all together. And the more we focus on the similarities, the sooner we're going to get to a place where we can have real conversations and begin to make real change on a local and global scale.
Wow.
Beautifully said.
Beautifully said. I was just thinking, we always ask our guests at the end of our time for a golden nugget, but I feel like we just got our
whole lunch.
Yeah, that was just really beautifully stated. And that's, something that we are focused on in A2YO is when you're making that shift or transition in life, it's usually about, how do I have a bigger impact? What do I want my legacy to really be? And it's about service, and how do I incorporate that into my life so my life has more meaning and I can feel like I change the world in my own special way. So thank you for that. It was just beautiful, really.
Poetry in its own right.
Yes.
And so what's next for you, Michael, and what's next for the FNE International?
Well, going to keep plugging away and really focus right now on trying to create this virtual 10th anniversary experience. We're going to take people to visit our school in the Dominican Republic. It's located in Villa Caoba, which is near La Romana. So it's about an hour or so from the airport. And that first tour is going to take place on the 20th of July. And then on the 27th of July, we're gonna visit Peru, and I'll be in Peru at that moment. And we're going to focus on an infrastructure project, some sustainable eco latrines that we've built in a place called Minas de Pedregal, which is a settlement in Lima. Lima is a very interesting, and Peru is a very interesting place because there's a lot of history of people coming from the provinces, from the rural areas outside of Lima, and squatting and creating these sort of informal settlements that become communities. So where the Holy Cross priests, the priests that run Stonehill College, have their mission is in a place called San Juan de Lurigancho. So this Minas de Pedregal is San Juan de Lurigancho was built on a sort of desert munitions dump, and this is above that. So this is from that mission site, 3 kilometers up, winding crazy road. And so these folks have been living informally on this land for 5 or 6 years, and they don't have access to potable water. They don't have access to sewage yet. And so we've built these latrines, and we're going to be showing that project on the 27th. And then on the 29th, we'll be touring Nicaragua and really looking at all of our projects. I mean, so our most complete sort of picture happens here in Nicaragua. So we're going to look at our health programs. We're going to look at our education programs. We're going to look at our infrastructure programs. And again, organizationally, we've been really fortunate. We have a board member, Veronica, who lives in Peru and is Peruvian. We have a new board member in Dominican Republic, Nairobi, who's a U.S. trained attorney who lives in Santo Domingo, who lives in the Dominican Republic, and they've been really essential to helping us fill the gap, because here in Nicaragua we have this big staff. So we have this sort of full-time team, but having these board members really is giving us a critical component that we were lacking. And again, we're going to keep trying to design trips. We have a number of irons in the fire and trying to figure out what that landscape is going to look like. And the hope, as I said, is to have a small trip here to Nicaragua in August. We have elections coming up in November, so we want to be conscious of that and probably not do anything too close to election time, but we're hopeful that August could happen. And again, I think that for me as a executive director, for us as an organization, there needs to be constant motion and constant development and constant growth. And every trip, every experience, every action builds upon a previous action. We're always learning, we're always growing, and we're always trying to do things a little bit better. And I mean, I know I've made my share of mistakes, said my share of stupid things, done my share of idiotic things in my lifetime. And every one of those things is an opportunity to learn and grow, and not necessarily dwell on, but to take from and build and grow and get to sort of the next level. And so we're always trying to take FNE to the next level. And over the course of the past 3 years, we've been really kind of kicked in the knees a couple times, but we've kept moving. We've gotten up and we've kept going, and we're looking for new ways and new methods to reach our ultimate goal.
That is a worthy endeavor. And I can't even begin to comprehend what that looks like. It's so complex and multi-layered and leveled. But you are an amazing leader for those initiatives, Michael.
Absolutely.
Really.
And for our folks who are listening, you can learn more about Michael's organization, FNE International, at FNEInternational.org. You can also find FNE International on Facebook and also on Instagram.
And before we sign off here, we also want to give a special thanks to our talented and wonderful producers behind the scenes, Kathy Carswell and Susan Nagel.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, thank you so much. As a fellow Stonehill College alum, my heart is beyond touched. And for your friendship and just knowing someone like you makes my day and it makes this world a little brighter. So it is left for me to say, go forth, be brave, live well, and do good, because it's Act 2 and you're on.
Act 2 You're On was brought to you by Act 2 Share Our Stage.
You can find us at a2yo.com and also on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Please listen and subscribe wherever you find your podcast. You can support us using Patreon. Thanks for listening.